Imagine being a nuclear missile officer stationed at one of America's most secure Air Force bases, entrusted with guarding the nation's arsenal of nuclear missiles. Your duty is clear, ensuring they stand ready to respond to any potential threat. But then, without warning, the tranquil night sky is shattered by the sudden appearance of an unidentified flying object looming ominously overhead. Before you can comprehend what's happening, alarms blare and your worst fears are realized as the control panels light up with warnings. America's most powerful weapons have been disabled, rendered inoperable by an inexplicable force. You don't have to imagine. It really happened. And, chillingly, it wasn't an isolated incident, but a recurring nightmare. In the midst of the Cold War, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached a fevered pitch, with the threat of nuclear annihilation hanging heavy in the air. Malmstrom Air Force Base, nestled in the vast expanse of rural Montana, played a crucial role in America's defense strategy, housing a formidable arsenal of Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yet, amidst the backdrop of this tense geopolitical climate, another threat lurked in the skies above. In 1966, Malmstrom Air Force Base became the epicenter of one of the most baffling and unsettling events in the annals of UFO lore, the Malmstrom Air Force Base UFO incident. What began as isolated sightings soon escalated into a series of inexplicable encounters as multiple military personnel reported witnessing unidentified flying objects hovering near the base's missile sites. Even more disturbing, on more than one occasion, these mysterious craft seemed to possess the ability to disrupt the operation of America's most powerful nuclear weapons. As rumors swirled and speculation ran rampant, the United States Air Force launched a comprehensive investigation. But the truth behind these unsettling events remains shrouded in mystery to this day. On Thursday morning, March 16, 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in central Montana, Captain Eric Carlson and First Lieutenant Walt Feigl, the Echo Flight Missile Combat Crew, were below ground in the Launch Control Center. The Echo Launch Control Center was located between Winfred and Hilger, about 15 miles north of Lewiston. Missile maintenance crews and security teams were on duty at the launch facilities, having performed some work before the previous day and stayed there overnight. During the early morning hours, more than one report came in from the security patrols and maintenance crews that they had seen UFOs. A UFO was reported directly above one of the missile silos. It turned out that at least one security policeman was so affected by this encounter that he never again returned to missile security duty. Around 8:30 a.m., Feigl was briefing the crew commander on the flight status when the alarm horn sounded. One of the Minutemen missiles they supervised had become inoperable. It was one of the two sites where maintenance crews had camped out on site. At first, Feigl figured that the maintenance personnel had failed to notify him that the missile was going off alert status, as required by procedure when maintenance work is done on a missile. Feigl immediately called the missile site. When Feigl spoke with the on-site security guard, he reported that they had not yet performed any maintenance that morning. He also stated that a UFO had been hovering over the site. Feigl recalls thinking the guard must have been drinking. However, Now other missiles started to go off alert in rapid succession. Within seconds, the entire flight of 10 ICBMs was down. All of their missiles reported a no-go condition. One by one, in quick succession, across the board, each missile had become inoperable. When the checklist procedure had been completed for each missile site, it was discovered that each of the missiles had gone off alert status due to a guidance and control system fault. Power wasn't lost to the sites. The missiles weren't operational because, for some unexplainable reason, each of their guidance and control systems had malfunctioned. 2 security alert teams were dispatched from Echo to those sites where the maintenance crews were present. Feigl had not informed the security alert teams that one of the on-site guards had reported a UFO. On arrival at the silos, the security alert teams reported back that UFOs had been seen hovering over each of the 2 silos by all of the maintenance and security personnel present at each site. Captain Don Crawford's crew relieved the Echo flight crew later that morning. Crawford recalls that both Carlson and Feigl were still visibly shaken by what had occurred. Crawford also recalled that the maintenance crews worked on the missiles the entire day and late into the night during his shift to bring them all back on alert. Not only had missiles been lost to our deterrent forces, but had remained out of service for an entire day. Because of this unique incident, as an ex-missileer describes it, all hell broke loose. Because not only did it happen at one launch facility, that same morning, the same thing happened again at another launch facility on the same base. The Oscar Flight Launch Control Center was located about 20 miles southeast of Echo Flight Launch Control Center. Robert Salas was deputy commander of Oscar Flight that morning. He was below ground in the Launch Control Center during the morning hours of March 16, 1967. Outside, above the subterranean Launch Control Center, it was a typical clear, cold Montana night sky. There were a few inches of snow on the ground. Where he was, there were no city lights to distract from the spectacular array of stars, and it was not uncommon to see shooting stars. Airmen on duty topside usually spent some of their time outside looking up at the stars. It was one of those airmen who saw what at first appeared to be a star begin to zigzag across the sky. Then he saw another light do the same thing, except this one was larger and closer. Just moments before the system's failure, a security officer on the surface made a series of increasingly frenzied phone calls to Salas, describing an oval-shaped form with pulsating, glowing orange-red lights hovering over the installation. The security officer had also described the approach of the silent object, which was making unusual controlled maneuvers, like flying very fast, coming to a dead stop, then reversing course and making 90-degree turns. Salas was locked into the subterranean capsule for security reasons. Salas stated, "He was screaming on the phone, terrified." However, Salas calmly replied to security, "Great, you just keep watching them and let me know if they get any closer." He didn't take this report seriously and directed security to report back if anything more significant happened. At the time, Salas believed this first call to be a joke. Still, that sort of behavior was definitely out of character for air security policemen, whose communications with them were usually very professional. Responding to his orders, other security guards scrambled to other launch sites in the complex. only to see glowing objects hovering over them also. Salas said, "It was reported they lost radio contact with the flight security controller and were very shaken by the experience." Less than a minute after the pulsating object had arrived over the Launch Control Center, it quickly departed. A few minutes later, the security officer called again. This time, he was clearly frightened and was shouting his words. "Sir, there's one hovering over the front gate." "One what?" "A UFO. It's just sitting there. We're all just looking at it. What do you want us to do?" "What? What does it look like?" I can't really describe it. It's glowing red. What are we supposed to do?" "Make sure the site is secure and I'll phone the command post." "Sir, I have to go now. One of the guys just got injured." Before Salas could ask about the injury, he had already hung up. He immediately went over to his commander, Lieutenant Fred Mywald, who was on a scheduled sleep period. He woke him and began to brief him about the phone calls and what was going on topside. In the middle of this conversation, they both heard the first alarm echo through the confined space of the Launch Control Center, and both immediately looked over at the panel of lights at the commander station. A no-go light and 2 red security lights were lit, indicating problems at one of the missile sites. Shaken, Fred jumped up to query the system to determine the cause of the problem. Before he could do so, another alarm went off at another site, then another, and another simultaneously. Within the next few seconds, they had lost 6 to 8 missiles to a no-go or inoperable condition. After reporting this incident to the command post, he called back the security guard. The guard said that the man who had approached the UFO had not been injured seriously, but was being evacuated by helicopter to the base. Once topside, Salas spoke directly with the security guard about the UFOs. He added that the UFO had a red glow and appeared to be saucer-shaped. He repeated that it had been seen immediately outside the front gate, hovering silently. They sent a security patrol to check their launch facilities after the shutdown, and security reported sighting another UFO during that patrol. They also lost radio contact with the site immediately after reporting the UFO. They were relieved by their scheduled replacement crew later that morning. However, the missiles had still not been brought online by the on-site maintenance teams. Again, UFOs had been sighted by security personnel at or about the time the nuclear missiles shut down. With this many nuclear missiles mysteriously going offline, a massive, in-depth investigation of the incident was undertaken. Full-scale on-site laboratory tests were conducted at the Boeing Company's Seattle plant. Declassified strategic missile wing documents and interviews with ex-Boeing engineers who conducted the tests following the incident investigation confirmed that no cause for the missile shutdowns was ever found. Robert Kaminsky was the Boeing Company engineering team leader for this investigation. Kaminsky stated that after all tests were done, there were no significant failures, engineering data, or findings that would explain how 10 missiles were knocked off alert, and there was no technical explanation that could account for the event. The most that could be done was to reproduce the effects by introducing a 10-volt pulse onto a data line. Another Boeing Company engineer on the team, Robert Reichert, came up with this pulse that repeated the shutdown effects 80% of the time, but only when directly injected at the logic coupler. No explanation could be found for a source of such a pulse occurring in the field and, moreover, getting inside the shielded missile system equipment. Others on the engineering team checked other possibilities. Lightning and problems with commercial power system were eliminated as the source of the problem. William Dutton, another Boeing Company engineer, checked commercial power interruptions and transients and stated that no anomalies were found in the area. Several military activities and other engineering firms participated in the investigation, but no positive cause for the shutdowns was ever found, despite extensive and concentrated effort. One hypothesis was that the only way a pulse could be sent in from outside the shielded system was through an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, from an unknown source. The technology of the 1960s made generating an EMP of sufficient power to enter the shielded system a very difficult proposition, requiring large, heavy, bulky equipment. The source of the actual pulse that caused the missile shutdowns remains a mystery to this day. Salas said he was also told to never speak of the incident, as it was now classified. He signed a non-disclosure agreement and didn't start talking about it until 1996. He recalls at that time in 1967, his colleague, Colonel Fred Mywald, telling him there'd been an earlier, similar incident at Malmstrom, but only discovered decades later. And it had occurred just 8 days before his own experience. He also learned 10 ICBMs had been disabled under identical circumstances in September 1966 at the Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. Within a span of 6 months, we lost 30 nuclear missiles to UFOs, said Salas, who provided an Air Force document declassified in 1996 regarding the March 16 incident at Malmstrom. The March 17, 1967 communication contains clear expressions of alarm and bewilderment. It reads, "All 10 missiles in Echo flight at Malmstrom lost strategic alert within 10 seconds of each other." During his remaining 2 years on missile duty at Malmstrom, Salas said he never once heard the incidents mentioned, but added he rejected security officer witnesses' agitated pleas to discuss it soon after it happened, out of fear of breaching the NDA. But with the release in recent years of U.S. Navy videos of pilots' encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, and a trickle of other evidence, that taboo has thawed. And in 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense created the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, which Salas describes as a conduit for whistleblowers. The mission of the AARO is to synchronize efforts across the Department of Defense and with other U.S. federal departments and agencies to detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest in, on, or near military installations, operating areas, training areas, special use airspace, and other areas of interest, and as necessary to mitigate any associated threats to safety of operations and national security. This includes anomalous, unidentified space, airborne, submerged, and transmedium objects, states a July 20, 2022 press release. Salas said for nearly 2 hours he was briefed via phone by an AARO official on his 1967 experience in what he called a watershed moment. He's convinced the military and government has covered up incidents like this all along. "It is a milestone for me because I have never told my story to a government office," he said, adding the AARO official seemed receptive and appreciative. "I went through all the details extensively. It shows they're at least open to listening to witnesses and making an official record of what we say." Salas said he provided AARO with 22 pieces of documentary evidence, including written notes and video. Affidavits signed by several other officers 13 years ago attest to the occurrences at Minot and in Montana, which extended over months and whose frequency even necessitated special UFO briefings. Not only were UFOs seen at 2 different launch facilities at Malmstrom Air Force Base, shockingly, sightings had been reported by several civilians in the area shortly before that. According to articles from the Great Falls Tribune newspaper, on February 8, 1967, Louis de Leon saw 2 strange objects in the sky which did not look like airplanes, and they glowed an orange and red color while driving east of Chester, Montana. Later, 10 miles east of Chester, Jake Walkman was awakened by a bright light in his home. From his backyard, he spotted a flying saucer-shaped object. The next evening, George Kawanishi, a foreman for the Great Northern Railroad, saw a bright ball of light in the sky directly above the Chester train depot. These are but a few of the sightings which preceded the missile shutdown incidents later in March. It was during this same period, according to Colonel Don Crawford, USAF retired, that a 2-person security team assigned to Echo Flight was performing a routine check of the missile launch facilities a few miles north of Lewistown, Montana. As they approached one of the launch facilities, an astonishing sight caused the driver to slam on his brakes. Stunned in amazement, they watched as, about 300 feet ahead, a very large glowing object hovered silently, directly over the launch facility. One of them picked up his VHF hand microphone and called Captain Crawford, who was the commander on duty that evening. "Sir, you won't believe what I'm looking at," he said. He described what they were seeing. Crawford didn't believe him at first, but the young airman insisted he was telling the truth, his voice revealing his emotional state. Eventually, Crawford took him seriously enough to call the command post and report it. The officer on duty at the command post refused to accept the report and simply stated, "We no longer record those kinds of reports," indicating he didn't want to hear about the UFO. Crawford, unsure what to tell his shaken security guard, decided to give the guard his permission to fire his weapon at the object if it seemed hostile. "Thanks, sir, but I really don't think that would do any good." Probably not. A few seconds later, the object silently flew away. U.S. Air Force veteran Dr. Bob Jacobs shared with the AARO office his recollections of September 14, 1964. It's the day he viewed film of a UFO shooting down a warhead off the coast of California. Jacobs said of the nearly 3-hour-long telephone briefing, "I've been trying for 40 years to get the government to listen to me, and the AARO official said, 'Now we are.'" He was not interrupted. He only asked him not to name names, and he didn't. What he did tell AARO is how he operated an experimental photo project capturing the trajectory of an Atlas D missile using an extremely powerful telescope with a high-resolution camera. A few days after the launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base, Jacobs said he was summoned to a meeting attended by his military superior and 2 men in gray suits. Men in Black incognito? They watched a 16mm copy of the original 35mm film of the missile's journey. In it, a saucer-like craft appeared near the missile's dummy nuclear warhead, traveling up to 9,000 miles per hour at the edge of space. The UFO hit the warhead 4 times with some kind of beam, toppling it into the ocean below. "When I saw it, my mind was blown. "I didn't believe in UFOs when I was growing up," said the retired first lieutenant from his home in southern Missouri. "UFOs are real." At the meeting, the Air Force veteran said he was asked if he and his colleagues had doctored the film, a suggestion he vehemently denied. Jacobs said, "It looks like we've got a UFO," and was sternly told, "You're never to say that again. This never happened." Cover up. He's convinced the original film and its print were destroyed. Oh, I'm sure. Adding he was mysteriously harassed, even violently, after first publicly speaking about the episode in the early 1980s. He lost teaching jobs for speaking out, but he says he doesn't regret doing it. During the events of that morning in 1967, UFOs were sighted by security personnel at the Oscar facility and by other security and maintenance personnel at the Echo facility. These sightings were reported separately to the Launch Control Center crews at or about the same time all the nuclear missiles shut down at both sites. The United States Air Force has confirmed that all of Echo Flight's missiles shut down within seconds of each other and that no cause for this could be found. For many years, the Air Force has maintained that no reported UFO incident has ever affected national security. It's an established fact that a large number of Air Force personnel reported sighting UFOs at the time many of our strategic missiles became unlaunchable. The incidents clearly had national security implications. In one previously classified message, SAC headquarters described the incident as a loss of strategic alert of all 10 missiles within 10 seconds of each other for no apparent reason and a cause for grave concern. Were UFOs shutting down our nuclear missiles to warn us not to tamper with this technology? Were they telling us they can put an end to the nuclear arms race at any time they want? Or was it just a coincidence that UFOs were witnessed over the silos seconds before they became inoperable? The echoes of the unknown reverberate across the ages, a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in the answers we seek, but in the questions that remain unanswered. Thank you for watching and listening until the very end. You kicked total ass.